Hi everyone, Richard Lewis here. Today's video is going to be a bit of a departure of the stuff that I usually do. It's not going to be about gaming, although it is kind of a little bit. It's not going to be about esports, but what we're going to talk about is Reddit. And I'm sure, like me, you'll have noticed there's been lots of high-profile cases of Reddit kind of contradicting its stance as a platform for free speech, a platform for the free exchange of opinions. And we're just starting to see more and more that this isn't the case. Reddit proudly admit now that this isn't the case, even though it was just in 2012 that the former CEO was actually saying that was what they were kind of most proud of and that's what they aspired to be. And things are changing quite rapidly. Lots of users are starting to have a distaste for the direction Reddit's heading in. Now, I want to talk a little bit about just moderators in general now, just for those that aren't aware. Maybe I see people get this wrong all the time. There are two tiers, of course. You have Reddit admins, which are the Reddit staff, and then you have Reddit moderators. And in theory, anybody can become a moderator. You basically register a subreddit, or if a subreddit is already registered, somebody brings you in and gives you moderator powers. This is the power to delete. This is the power to remove posts. This is the power to sticky things. You do customize the subreddit in a way that you like. That's what being a mod ultimately is. So when people get the admins and mods confused, an admin is a Reddit employee, effectively. So I want to talk about mods first of all. And the way the Reddit model works is they basically say if you become a moderator of a subreddit, you can do whatever you want. You can run your subreddit, your space, if you will, however you see fit, which I guess is fine in principle, but as subreddits grow in size, and indeed as Reddit has grown in size, this opens up the possibility for some fairly impactful abuse of those moderator privileges with not a lot of accountability or recourse if you as a user find this distasteful. Now, I've often theorized that within the Reddit model, the abuse of mod powers has to exist because why would anybody want to be a moderator? It can be a lot of work. I don't think anybody disputes that, especially in a sizable subreddit or one of the default subreddits. But why would anyone do it if it's such a hard job? Well, we've all heard the whole "we do it for free" argument when moderators are under pressure to justify their decisions and their actions. They say, "Oh, but we do this for free, it's such a hard job." Well, think about why they do it at all, because actually it's a shortcut to prominence within a community that perhaps you can't achieve prominence within through other means, because you become incredibly powerful from just a volunteer position. Suddenly you hold dominion over content creators who are reliant on clicks for their income. You can divert the flow of a conversation. You can censor dissenting opinions. You can shill for developers, or you go the other way and use a subreddit to apply pressure to developers based on your own kind of personal preferences. So you have this incredible sphere of influence suddenly just by holding your hand up and saying, "I'd like to do that," and somebody saying, "Yeah, that's cool with me." So there is rules that govern moderators, and again, like I say, I feel that no moderator would want to volunteer to be one if you weren't allowed to just completely ignore these and operate how you want. And it's something called Moderator. Now, it's quite short, but I won't waste time on the video reading all of it out. I think that's a fairly, it's a waste of time. Ultimately, you can go check it out for yourself. I'll put the link in the YouTube description, but I'll read the parts that I think are incredibly pertinent to moderator behavior and what we're starting to see increasingly as not being observed. Now, the first thing it says, please do be calm and polite even when users are not. Now, increasingly we're seeing leaks from ModMail where moderators are being anything but, and indeed publicly are just behaving like you or I supposedly have the right to, by being abusive, and of course with the added bonus that if they don't like what you're saying, they can just simply remove it or remove your privileges to post at all. It says offer helpful rule explanations, tips and links to new or confused users. Well, more often than not, if someone stumbles into a subreddit and behaves in a way that contravenes one of the rules or something that isn't clear, a moderator won't actually take the time out of their day, because remember, they're too busy, and will just penalize somebody. It says try to respond to all of your moderator mail, even if you cannot address it in a timely manner. Well, again, I think one of the ongoing complaints is that there's a lack of communication from moderators when it comes to people wanting to find out, well, why was I banned? What did I do wrong? What's happened? It says try to inform users when you remove their content. You can leave a distinguished comment on what their post with link flare. And again, if a controversial piece of content disappears, there's no comment to say why. More often than not, people are kind of left in the dark. There's been a lot of stealth removals lately. And again, this has all been deemed to be acceptable within this part of the greater narrative. Now, in Please Don't, and this is where it becomes absolutely key, I think, it says, for moderators, don't remove content based on your opinion. Well, this is happening all the time, in fact, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as the video progresses. But that's a key thing here. Don't remove content based on your opinion. Well, subreddits pretty much operate on that premise, and in fact, many subreddits have become just echo chambers of one particular line of thought, not predicated on what the community wants, but actually just predicated on the moderator team and their particular political leanings. It says you shouldn't publish moderator mail publicly without permission of those involved. We see that happen quite often. You shouldn't take on moderation roles in more subreddits than you can handle. We're going to talk about power moderators. We're seeing increasingly this isn't being enforced. People have moderation powers in hundreds and hundreds of subreddits, which just clearly isn't practical by that rule alone. It says don't take moderation positions in communities where your profession, employment, or biases, which obviously applies to inherent political biases and viewpoints, could pose a direct conflict of interest to the neutral and user-driven nature of Reddit. Well, again, this is one of the most obvious pieces of moderate that is breached on a daily basis without any consequences whatsoever. It also says you shouldn't encourage or feed trolls. You shouldn't ban users from subreddits in which they have not broken any rules. Now, actually, just the other day, an admin staff member publicly said that they were all for the idea of preemptive bans, that if you observe a user posting in another subreddit and you feel their viewpoints aren't going to be conducive to your subreddit, a preemptive ban makes sense. Well, that actually contravenes Moderator right there. So even this is here, and the admins don't even believe in it. So it's no wonder it's not being enforced. And of course, the key one here is do not interfere with other subreddits or their moderation. Well, we've seen multiple subreddits that are dedicated just to that. I mean, subreddit drama, for example, that influences policy in other subreddits by highlighting things that they consider unpalatable. So immediately you can see Moderator is just ridiculous in the sense that it's not enforced, and moderators have no code of ethics or standards to which they are held accountable. You know, if Moderator was enforced, how many mods do you think would actually be left on the site? Wouldn't be many. And this is the fundamental problem at the heart of Reddit, before we get into the others, that users are subject to the whims of vague rules from the admins, and then you have to get your head around every other subreddit having its own set of rules. Then on top of that, there's these friendly guidelines like the 9:1 self-submission ratio, which is basically you can submit one piece of your own content or content you're directly linked to or would benefit from being promoted to 9 others to prevent you using Reddit as a platform for free advertising. Now, you see multiple people breaking this rule without any consequence, and then you'll see some people, they barely break the rule at all. That's it, you're out. You've made 10 submissions and 2 were of your own, so you're out immediately. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, there's no consistency here. And that's the problem. These are guidelines, and they are enforced. They're presented as guidelines, but they're enforced like laws, like legal statute, whenever an admin notices them or deems you to have broken them. But the guidelines surrounding moderator behavior, they're never enforced. And it's always the same non-committal, mods can behave however they want in their own subreddits bullshit. Now, maybe that would be okay if you could localize them on one fucking subreddit, but Reddit doesn't allow for limitations on how many subreddits you can moderate. So a person who wants to abuse their position in a community that they care about and directly have an understanding of and are directly linked to, they can just as easily join a community they have nothing to do with, they don't have an understanding of, and they can enforce the same bullshit over there. So you've got moderators who are mods in over 400 subreddits. 400. I want you to think about that number. And that, that whenever they're challenged about this, they always say, I got the time to do it. Most of those subreddits are joke subreddits anyway. And it's like, that just shouldn't be happening. You should not be giving somebody that level of influence on what is meant to be a community-driven platform. So even if you were to limit it to something ridiculously high, as you can only be a moderator in 20 subreddits, that itself would go some distance to cutting out the cancer that is eating Reddit from the inside, which is these power moderators taking their political ideology that may or may not be appropriate for one tiny section of Reddit, but then making it permeate through other parts of Reddit that aren't interested or shouldn't be affected by it. So I'm really sick and tired of the politicizing of things that have nothing to do with politics at all. And I don't understand where we're going to draw the line on this shit. It seems to me that there's lots of things that are becoming really overtly politicized. Things like gaming, obviously. And I don't think actually that should be the case. I think people are overthinking it. I think people are creating false narratives to have this ongoing argument, and I think the majority of people don't really care about it. So, you've got to ask where we're going to draw the line, How long before we're having discussions about, like, which corporate coffee house do you use? Oh, well, the Starbucks logo has a woman on it, so that's patriarchy, you shitlord. And they reply with, oh, well, I use Costa because it reminds me of the cost of living behind the poor people that picked the beans. And then someone says, well, I can't drink Costa. It's a little too close to the word cunt, don't you think? And that's why I go to Cafe Nero, and then they get criticised because isn't Nero the guy who writes for Breitbart? So it's getting ridiculous. There was an example in the subreddit for science. Now, you would like to think that science should be immune from personal feelings, oh, well, I don't like that, and this makes me feel uncomfortable. Science is about trying to determine absolute truth. And obviously science can change. Science can be wrong. People do studies and they're trying to get to the crux of a matter, and then people have a debate based on the merits of that study and research. Maybe they bring other studies that show contradictory things, and you have an academic debate. You cannot just silence one aspect of science because it makes you feel uncomfortable. Well, that happened just the other day. There was a thread entitled "Gender and Racial Bias Can Be Unlearned During Sleep, New Study Suggests," which linked to an article in the Guardian newspaper. And considering they won a Pulitzer Prize in 2014, I have to say I was a little bit disappointed that the science correspondent ran this article predicated on quite a study that definitely had flaws and was open to criticism within it. And I won't bore you with the details. That's probably a separate video in and of itself. But what happened was, because they were saying, oh, this is like a form of sleep hypnosis, mind control, and we could use it to remove things that we don't like, such as sexism and racism, then all the people who were promoting this were like, yeah, this is great. What could go wrong with a bit of mind control, right? What could possibly go wrong with that? And anybody that was saying this study is flawed, this is a bad idea, are we really advocating mind control? Those comments were deleted. It just became a comment graveyard in science, in the subreddit dedicated to science and scientific discussion. Now, that's a problem when that's happening. So there needs to be a clear line drawn on Reddit, I think, about the sort of politicizing of subreddits and applying your own personal views. They've talked a lot about safe spaces. Well, you know what a real safe space is? It's a place where opposing opinions can share their views, free from abuse, free from censorship, and free from real-world reprisals. It certainly isn't removing the side of the debate that you believe might be the most hostile. It certainly isn't closing down a subreddit dedicated to the sharing of illegal common interest because it generated some negative publicity for you at a time you're desperately trying to get in bed with corporate interests. And that was, of course, a reference to the removal of fat people hate, which we'll talk about in just a second. Now, while I want to move on talk about this other example in Planet Side, which is gaming, I think it's kind of pertinent just to point out. I've talked about this, for a long time, and that is that there's this myth that gaming is some sort of inherently problematic space in society where everyone is prejudicial. And I've said it for years that one of the best things about gaming is that because it all occurs online, we become projections of ourselves in a virtual world. Most of us, myself included, we check our real world baggage at the door. Which is a good point. We've got all of this focus on how we're going to sort out gender and racial equality within gaming, the implication being we've somehow fixed it in the real world, when in actual fact we haven't. So now we're free to focus on the lesser aspects of society. When we've defeated the glass ceiling that faces women entering in executive positions in society, maybe then we should beat our chests and talk about female characters and what they represent in games. Maybe when black people aren't being shot dead by American police officers, maybe then we can talk about The Witcher 3. I think we need to prioritize a little bit. And ultimately, as I said, for the most part, I don't think people are really, they're not really feeling that. I don't think the average gamer is a prejudicial being. Let's think about it. Where else would you find acceptance of things like furries? Let's say you're working a McDonald's job. Do you get to come dressed in a fucking fur coat and have a tail hanging out the back of you? And that's just not true at all. I've worked in jobs where I've had to manage an employee who took a holiday to get gender reassignment surgery. Then when they returned as a female, we had to negotiate issues such as the women wanting a former man to use the female toilets, but of course that same individual no longer wanting to use the men's. So I see a lot more tolerance in gaming than I ever did in the real fucking world, which is a good juncture to mention what happened with the Planet Side debacle, which is where a moderator basically banned a user for making a joke based around the word trap. Now that word served sort of a triple reference because he was referencing Dark Souls, he's also referencing the name of a gun in Planet Side, and of course it's a reference to highly successful cross-dressers, not necessarily transgendered people, who could trap members of the same sex into believing they were actually not so. So not only is it supposedly anti-transgender, which is something I can't see myself, maybe I'm a fucking dinosaur here, but the worst part about it is that the mod actually feels comfortable demanding a 500-word essay in exchange for being unbanned. They wanted a 500-word essay about how to, combat transgenderism and the problems facing people who are transgender. Now, again, this is in a gaming subreddit. This is in Planet Side. This is a subreddit dedicated to Planet Side players, and a moderator is banning people unless they're willing to write essays for him to mark about the problems facing transgendered people in society. Maybe I'm an idiot, I don't know, but I don't see that as appropriate. I don't even see that as related. And yet, despite it generating a ton of negative attention for the subreddit and the site, no action was taken because mods can behave how they want. And indeed, it's worth mentioning that in that moderator's comment history 2 years ago, he even makes the same joke himself and says trap threads, or trap jokes rather, are the best. So he's undergone some spiritual transformation in the last 2 years. Now, I would propose that if Reddit wanted to, again, fix problems like this, where moderators are basically humiliating users or attempting to, in order to gain access to the communities that they are interested in, how about putting a clear rule in place that moderators cannot demand actions of any kind in exchange for unbannings, and any moderator caught doing that is instantly removed? That's an easy way to fix the problem, but Reddit isn't interested in fixing the problem, because if you were to prevent the abuse, their little volunteer workforce might just dry right up, and then where are we? Power is appealing. Power with accountability, not so much. So that goes back right to what we were talking about at the start of the video. So I don't think it's a bad thing to have awareness about certain issues, and indeed in areas that maybe aren't directly linked to certain issues that are worth discussion, that are worth highlighting. There can be tangential links, and we can come together based on that link and then discuss it. But I don't think, in an art form where its principal reward is escapism for the majority of people, I don't see why we have to force those same people looking for that escapism to pick sides, adopt beliefs, become enlightened, educated, civilized, whatever you want to call it, towards certain worldviews. I'm pretty sure that the only battles most people want to become embroiled in when they're a gamer is on the fucking server, not this ream of shit where anything you say, even in passing, forces you to pick a side and become part of a permanent struggle for internet supremacy. I just don't think most people are hardwired to be interested in that. So it's got to be said that you can criticize moderators all you want, you can say they act like a bunch of corrupt petty politicians, but it's very hard really to level criticism at them when the Reddit staff themselves are doing the exact same thing. If you want to talk about Ellen Powell's husband, Buddy Fletcher, and his involvement in a Ponzi scheme on Reddit, well, good luck with that. The threads are being removed en masse. If you want to publicize the fact that she is refusing to drop her bogus lawsuit unless she gets a settlement of $2.7 million, which just so happens to be the same amount a New York state judge ordered Buddy Fletcher to pay to a law firm that represented him in his racial discrimination complaint against Dakota Apartments, then you're on the wrong site. They're not going to allow it. So the admins, the staff themselves are banning people for highlighting things about them. It is not an open and free speech platform anymore. Clearly, they have no interest in that. Reddit is becoming rapidly again, an echo chamber of one set of ideologies, and actually people are becoming above reproach. You can't criticize the interim CEO of Reddit on Reddit, not to any great degree. Certainly the smaller subreddits seem to be allowed to, but numerous front page posts disappear. So how can we criticize moderators, the volunteers, when actually the admins, first of all, are enabling them, second of all, encouraging it, and then third of all, they're engaging in the exact same behavior themselves? So let's just move on to this fat people hate, which only just happened yesterday. And again, a summary of that is that the fat people hate subreddit, which it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a subreddit dedicated to criticizing fat people and mocking fat people and that sort of thing, have been removed for harassment. And this was predicated on they had a picture of somebody on their sidebar, and that person apparently found out about it, or the relative or the mother found out about it, talked about how the individual in the photo had it pointed out to them that they were close to suicide and they were depressed and autistic and they weren't able to process what was happening. The subreddit itself, as it has grown in size, has generated constant negative publicity for being a fat shaming site, for being a hate subreddit. Now, I'm going to come out and defend the right for that subreddit to exist, and I say that knowing that I wouldn't be welcome to participate in any discussions there. I'm fat. I've got a beer gut like a fucking medicine ball. I use the word overweight because it's more palatable to me than fat, and in my mind I assign the word fat to people who are actually obese. Now, I know I should do something about it, but I don't, and I can pretend it's not down to laziness, but it is. So eventually, if I don't do something about it, the resulting health problems will be a burden on society in the form of taxation when I go for my free healthcare. And for something preventable with some effort on my part, I can understand why people who have the discipline I lack would be pissed off about that. Now, do I hate fat people? Well, no. And do I think people have the right to express that collectively, even if I disagree, even if I'm one of the targets? Well, of course I do, because any other viewpoint to that is disgraceful. Now, I've seen no evidence whatsoever of anything that constitutes genuine harassment from that sub. They've never gone after anyone. They've never gotten anyone fired. They've never published personal information that isn't publicly available. What they've done is point and laugh and ridicule. And while it's not something I'd ever engage in myself, it's equally not something I'd seek to suppress. I think labeling them as a hate sub might even be fair. But we're not going to ever get rid of hate within humankind, and you certainly don't do it by taking away a publicly viewable platform where we can see it quite openly. The evidence of harassment isn't there for that particular subreddit, and what there is pales into insignificance compared to the other subreddits that have made their reputation on actively harassing people, like ShitReddit says. And if the mods are breaking any laws in terms of what they're doing by posting pictures of overweight people, then Reddit can simply comply with the law. That could be a takedown, that could be providing information about the moderators if the person wanted to sue them for damages. That is legal, that is what has to happen. I don't think you need to shut down a whole subreddit over one or two incidents, not unless you've had that tap on the shoulder from the paymaster saying we can't endorse you while you endorse that. There's a wishy-washy argument that was made by the Reddit staff at the time, and they were saying that they're not banning ideas, they're banning actions, which is why all the other hate subs get to say, and that's simply not true either. What they really mean is those subs, those other hate subreddits, haven't generated media attention or complaints from significant personalities. The mainstream media hasn't run wild with something that's got a very nice eye-grabbing headline. So just like Reddit did for the fappening, which of course was them coming out and saying we've got to remove all these celebrity nude pictures that are being exchanged because it's a violation of people's privacy, and we don't stand for that. But while they were championing the right for celebrities to have their nudes removed from the internet, they were allowing the exact same thing to happen to people in other subreddits on a daily basis on their website without any incident. So why is that? Well, of course, A, it's the level of attention it's generating within the media, and B, it's the fact that, hey, we like those AMAs. If celebrities say, well, we can't support Reddit anymore, Reddit's going to lose a big chunk of traffic. So it's not about the principle. It's never about the principle with Reddit. They don't stand for principles. It's simply about doing whatever they have to do to cement their position as a powerful website, and now a powerful website that they can look to monetize. And all the while that's going on and they're presenting that lie, they're just, when you spin it in the way that they've spun it to all of us, it just shows how much contempt they've come to hold their entire user base in. So for me, Reddit has been compromised. I think it's been heading this way for a long time. It's only getting worse, and Reddit make no bones about it. The admins, the CEO, they're publicly saying this is what Reddit is. This is what Reddit is going to become. It's only going to go one way, and if you don't like it, actually you're no longer welcome. So while I'm sure it'll remain the front page of the internet for a while to come for a lot of people, for those of us who valued what it used to provide, which was access to as wide a range of opinions and information as possible, I think we can all agree that it is no longer fit for purpose. And the sooner a genuine alternative comes along, the better for all of us. Anyway, thanks for taking the time to listen to this rant. I'll see you on the next video.